Ezra Minton, age 75, rose from his bed that cool autumn morning. The sun was warm, and this made him happy because the chill of approaching winter was hard on old Ezra, made his bones ache. From here he washed his face, put on a pot of coffee, and began his day, just like he had done for the past 27 years. Suddenly there was a startling knock on his door. It was his landlord, and he was holding a piece of paper. Ezra and the other tenants in his building had just been informed that their home had been declared unsafe. They were to vacate the premises by the end of the month. 2 weeks later, old Ezra sat on a single cot inside a cold room lined with other cots. This was a Union Gospel mission, and it was his only option for emergency housing, and it was compliments of the local housing authority. 1 year later, in the lobby of his old apartment building, there is a coffee shop. Upstairs, there is a gleaming modern transformation. The former tenants were often offered first dibs if they were still interested in renting. Of course, it would be a substantial rent increase, they were told. Of course. My topic today is about a real estate term called gentrification. In today's housing crunch, there is an ever-expanding need for bigger and better commerce. While gentrification has certain advantages for some in the real estate world, it can be devastating for others. I'm qualified to bring you this topic as I've worked for a real estate agency and have seen firsthand the many outcomes surrounding gentrification. There are 3 main points I will address in the body of my speech. The first will be the history or origin of gentrification. The second will look at its advantages, and the third will be the disadvantages. The actual term gentrification comes from the 1960s by the British sociologist and city planner Ruth Glass. In her book, London: Aspects of Change, she addresses how the working class neighborhoods were being invaded by upper class gentries and how it changed the entire social character of the area. The actual word gentrification comes from the word gentry, and according to Webster's Dictionary 2020, a gentry is one of the upper or ruling class. Miss Glass had her eye on the British landscape, with her main focus on the possible restoration of existing historical or dilapidated properties. Modern-day scholars such as Roland Atkinson, from his article written in 2004, points out, though, that much of the time gentrification has less to do with restoration and more to do with the money to be made, or even greed. When Ruth Glass coined the term, she observed how upper-class British gentries were squeezing out the blue-collar workers. This same process we recognize today here in the United States. The so-called gentry class has traveled through history, and I assure you it is alive and well today. Now that you're familiar with the history of gentrification, I will move on to my next point, its advantages. In Lance Freeman's book, There Goes the Hood, he addresses the issues of inner-city ghettos, or hoods, with his focus primarily on Harlem in the 1960s. In his book, he points out that before the gentrification of Harlem, there was virtually no private investment there, and this translated to a steadily deteriorating center. The unpoliced, unfunded neglect of the city was its open-door invitation to drug abuse and crime. After the proposed gentrification of Harlem, there was both an uprising of both white and black upper-class residents. Due to the positives of gentrification, Harlem made a drastic turnaround. Many communities through the years, like Harlem, have prospered after gentrification. Some of these advantages are renewed developments, financial investments, and due to increased revenue and tax hikes, schools receive more funding, and educational programs are improved. All this seems to be positive, but notice the last sentence of that point. Increased revenue, tax hikes? This may be a good thing for some, but it is not so good for others. From here we will discuss the disadvantages of gentrification. We know it can actually harm people in more ways than one. One way is that individuals who are forcibly displaced from their homes can be financially harmed. This can happen through direct costs such as moving expenses, security deposits on new apartment buildings or homes. Many can't afford to live in their neighborhoods anymore due to increases in rent, taxes, and general revenue. The neighborhood may be improving, but not for them. This is an obvious negative outcome of gentrification. Another way that it can harm people is through something called cultural displacement. The 2019 article by Rebecca Anzi, Race, Class in the Cappuccino City, reveals that gentrification can eliminate the familiar established culture, and it can also eliminate its original residents. Even though certain residents may manage to withstand the skyrocketing high general revenue increases, yet they can no longer recognize their neighborhoods. What will be the cost of these residents to remain in a community where they no longer feel at home? The cost is many of these residents and displaced individuals suffer with mental health symptoms. In the 2018 article by Smith, Lenning, and Kim, it proves that adults in gentrifying neighborhoods suffer more with depression and anxiety symptoms. And according to the 2019 article, Gentrification and Low-Income Children, these symptoms can also be found in these little ones as well, especially those in the age bracket of 9 to 11. In the 2018 study by Marcia Robio, When Gentrification is a Mental Health Issue, it has much to say concerning these consequences that are sometimes overlooked or even hidden. It addresses how individuals facing gentrification not only lose their homes, but they lose their social connections, their cultural associations, and as well as any political power they may have established within their communities. This should be understood by all, that these are things that cannot be simply boxed up and taken with them. So to conclude, today I have discussed the topic of gentrification. The three main points I covered in the body of my speech were its origin and history. My second point looked at its advantages. And finally, I focused on some of the possible harms created by the process of gentrification. With this, I would like to make a request. The next time you get excited and maybe see a Save-A-Lot grocery store being replaced by a Whole Foods Market, a Clumpy's Creamery operating where there once was a local barber shop, or a shiny new Starbucks perking on the inside of an old hotel or apartment building, I would like you to think of gentrification. But then before you get too excited, I would like you to think of Ezra Minton. Thank you.